everyone, and you're all welcome to this June accountability session of the Northern Ireland Policing Board. Deputy Chief Constable, you are in the proverbial hot seat today as the Chief Constable is out of the country, and you are very welcome, as indeed is the rest of your team. We are also pleased to welcome Director General Graham Bigger from the National Crimes Agency for the biannual update report on activity. You're very welcome, Graham. We will begin with questions on the report received from the Office of the Chief Constable and then move to the NCA report. But before that, I'd like to give some opening remarks of my own, and I want to open with the topic of funding. I had the pleasure of attending the recent Police Federation event and the Superintendents Association AGM, and the issue of resourcing remains very much high on the agenda, albeit I think we are all agreed that we are in a better financial starting position this year than we were last year. That said, the recovery business case, which we all committed to and supported, has been approved by the Department of Finance. However, it's been approved without any monies currently forthcoming due to affordability. This is extremely disappointing and presents somewhat of a quandary on police recruitment plans. The Board remains fully supportive of the Chief Constable and indeed the need for increasing officer and staff numbers. We need to collectively engage with the Minister and Department officials on how this can now be moved forward through an in-year monitoring round. And we do need to raise wider issues, including the need for multi-year budgeting for PSNI, and as well as the inability to carry forward strategic reserves. Following last month's discussion on the management of legacy and associated costs in terms of resources, the Board will also be supporting the Chief in his bid to ensure the disproportionate impact that legacy has on the here and now service delivery, and we hope that that will be addressed. Finally, on resourcing and our most valuable resource, our people, can I extend my best wishes to officers injured over the course of the last month. I trust they are getting the organisational support that they require. I will be lending my support to raising awareness to the issue of assaults and attacks on our police officers and the new campaign launched this month as the figures continue to increase. We heard the very disturbing statistics at the recent Federation conference. Over the last 3 years, there have been staggering total of 9,415 assaults, and 2,826 of these have involved injury. On my recent visit to various areas around Northern Ireland, indeed referring to Newry in particular, the officers there spoke of an increase in ramming incidents which causes injury and damage to property. This is all very unacceptable. The Board had called for a review of legislation, and it is welcome that the Minister has indicated that this now will be addressed in the soon-to-be introduced sentencing bill. I want to move to the important issue of road safety. Last week, Board members had a very informative visit to meet with officers and staff on the road policing unit. We had the benefit of seeing and hearing about the proactive and reactive work of all of the officers in that unit. Road safety and the effectiveness of the PSNI in partnership with others is a new measure in the policing plan. The enforcement and preventative work that we heard about is vitally important in reducing road fatalities and injuries. End of year's figures show that people continue to act recklessly on our roads, so we all must continue to promote responsible driving and pedestrian safety. Crime figures, and this month the annual crime figures show that there were 8,233 fewer crimes, including violent offences, robbery, criminal damage and harassment when compared to the previous 12 months. The Board obviously condemned the fact that sexual offences and hate crime incidents have increased and continue to do so. This remains of concern, and we will be discussing these figures in detail at our committees. Finally, as a Board, we wish to send our thoughts to all of those affected in the terrible incident in Liverpool and to all of the first responders who worked so diligently in the hours and days after that incident. If I can now hand over to you, Deputy Chief Constable, for some brief opening remarks on the report submitted, and then we'll move to questions. Okay, thank you, and thank you for all of the questions. And I'm going to move to Director General now, and before we listen to your opening remarks, I have a few things to say, and I'm not going to say thank you to the PSNI just yet, because you may be brought in on the questions with the NCA as well, so you're not off the hook yet. Thank you for your report, and as I said earlier on, your patience. Your report provides a vast amount of information on the work of the agency. And as you will be aware, in the new policing plan for 2025 to 2030, we have a measure on tackling organised crime in all its forms. When I read the scope and scale of some of the investigations led and supported by the NCA, we are very grateful for the expertise and reach that your organisation brings. And of course, the agency had a very significant drugs find here a couple of weeks ago. We all know the importance of the NCA's work in supporting the work of the PSNI here. In respect of the 140 disruptions which are referenced in your report, it would be very helpful for us if you could provide assessment in your opening remarks of the increases and the decreases referenced, and also the trends here compared to those nationally. And perhaps you could also touch on the implications of the funding situation and your ability to deliver going forward in relation to that. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to hand over to you now, Graham, if you want to give us some of your remarks, and then we'll move to questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair. It's, as always, good to be here, and I say this at the start of every one of my sessions, but we take very seriously our responsibilities in Northern Ireland, as we do across the rest of the UK, and we take very seriously our accountability alongside our PSNI colleagues to the Northern Ireland Policing Board. So a pleasure to be here, and very happy to wait. No problem. Just a quick, Bobby referenced at the start that I might support him or say something about complexity in the law enforcement landscape, and that pertains to funding for all of us. So just first a word on that. So crime overall has gone down across the UK, as it has in Northern Ireland. If you look over the last 20, 30 years, the overall trend has been in that direction. And yet, within the crime that remains, we have seen increasing amounts of serious and organised crime. We've seen increasing amounts of vulnerability crimes, domestic abuse, child sexual abuse, crimes that are effectively hidden. So both sets of those crimes are more complex to investigate. They take more time, they take more effort. Separately, within society, we have all just got more digital and data devices. All of that is available. That needs to be reviewed. That provides a new attack surface, but just an awful lot more data to look at as you do any investigation. When we are then taking cases to court, and I think this is a UK and probably a global point rather than a Northern Ireland one, the threshold is higher to get over the line. All the standards that are in place to avoid miscarriages of justice mean that we have to do more work on each case to cross that threshold and make the case. The implication of that is it feels to me that the cost per case has gone up quite significantly over a period of time, even though the overall number of cases has gone down. And of course, all of our work, and we've seen that in the questions that you have been asking of PSNI, takes place in the daily glare of social media commentary, of the videoing of individual incidents, which is something that our predecessors did just not have to deal with. So that's just to back up Bobby's point earlier on about the complexity that we are all working within. So then just the overall threat from serious and organised crime, kind of nationally and globally. We publish an assessment every year. We published our last assessment in March. So just a couple of headlines from that. So overall, we have assessed that the threat from serious and organised crime has gone up over the last year, albeit at a slightly slower pace than previously. When we break it down into the individual threat types, we've seen increases in child sexual abuse, in drugs, in fraud, in illicit finance and money laundering, and in organised immigration crime. We have not seen increases, it's been relatively flat, in firearms crimes, in cyber crimes, in modern slavery and human trafficking, and in organised acquisitive crime. So several that have gone up and a number that have stayed stable. A few macro trends within all of that, increases in illegal immigration. I mean, globally, absolutely throughout Europe and absolutely in the UK are really stark and becoming an increasing priority, not just for governments, but for law enforcement and absolutely for the NCA. while here in Belfast we're obviously a long way away from the English Channel, we do see that organised immigration crime impact Northern Ireland too, for a number of reasons, but including the common travel area. We had the safeguarding, but also some arrests, around 14 migrants discovered in Loch Ryan in December 2024, and we had a 3-week intensification alongside our colleagues in PSNI, Home Office Immigration Enforcement, and the Garda as well, just last month, which led to 25 arrests in Northern Ireland, 33 in general. So we're seeing illegal immigration play out as a challenge for us all. We have seen increases over a period of time in the drugs threat to kind of globally and in the UK, and I'll come back to that specifically in relation to Northern Ireland. And then thirdly, the other big trend we have seen is the risk that we all face from the fact that we are living our lives more online than we ever used to do. We are living and working and playing online, and we see that play out then in crimes in relation to online fraud, cyber crimes, and child sexual abuse and exploitation. And the particular example of that we highlighted in our March publication was the emergence over the last 2 years, but particularly over the last year, of a newish phenomenon generally called the COM, which is a grouping of kind of online gangs of boys with a kind of nihilistic, misogynistic bent, who focus on grooming and coercing often young girls into abusing themselves and into self-harm. And this is particularly an English-speaking phenomenon at the moment, does not appear to have spread to the rest of the world, but it causes enormous harm to the individuals that get involved in it. So we did an alert out to chief constables in March. We have a number of live investigations into it across the UK. We've had a number of prosecutions so far. We have not had incidences of this play out that we have seen in Northern Ireland yet. We don't have any active investigations in relation to Northern Ireland, but that will come. That is just an inevitable part of what we are dealing with. It is just the latest manifestation of the challenges, massive opportunities as well, of course, but the challenges that come from living life online and the weird polarisation and normalisation of extreme behaviour that you see there. Moving on to the report that we have provided in relation to our activity in Northern Ireland. As you said, Chair, overall disruptions over the last 6 months, 140, so that's an increase of 31 on the previous 6 months. There are ups and downs within that, as you alluded to, and some of those I think are just a factor or a function of the fact we're giving you 6-month snippets, and so it's harder to see the long-term trend. So one of the reflections we've had from looking at the report is that we need to provide that long-term trend, so a kind of 5-year set of the 6-month periods, and we can see more clearly what's happening. So we have, for example, seen minor disruptions go up and moderate disruptions go up, but the major ones have slipped in the last 6 months. We don't think that's a material long-standing trend. The long-standing trend, which has been part of our strategy, is to increase the number and proportion of disruptions we have that are major and moderate. I think that is still happening. We just happen to have had a 6-month period where particularly the drug and fraud disruptions have not been significant. So I don't think that is material kind of long-term position. One thing you'll also have seen flagged up in the report is that the proportion of drug disruptions is lower in Northern Ireland than in the rest of the UK. That's actually a function of the huge number of what we call border referrals that we've had in the rest of the UK, and there's been an increase in Northern Ireland, but a much smaller increase. So by border referrals, this is primarily people who are coming into airports with suitcases that are full of cannabis. And they are identified by Border Force and referred to the NCA for investigation. And we would typically in a year have 200 of those. In the last year we had 1,000. So they have, over the last 2 years, basically increased fivefold. It's been a very, very significant trend and a very big drain on our resources. And that's played out. That started off in London, but primarily around Heathrow, and has spread to a series of other airports. We have seen increases in Northern Ireland. This was pretty rare. We had 13 border referrals last year of that type, but the increase here has been much lower. So we've seen our overall statistics being really quite skewed by the number of these border referrals that we've had in the rest of the UK. So it's more of a function of what's been happening in the rest of the UK rather than a change in Northern Ireland. You'll have seen also, you asked for the things that have gone up and down, an increase in the illicit finance disruptions. So that is a result, and I'll come back to it, of some really good asset recovery work. And Davey was touching on the work of the Paramilitary Crime Task Force alongside the Paramilitary Crime Task Force. It's been as a result of increasingly good work by our Financial Intelligence Unit with PSNI. It's been the offshoot of some continuing covert investigations that we have got, and also some of it is the function of our big Operation Destabilise that I spoke about the last time I was here, a big investigation into Russian-linked cryptocurrency money laundering kind of globally, which had a nexus in the UK. So that's what's behind the increase in illicit finance disruptions. I was going to mention 3 areas in a little more detail. I don't know if you've got time at the moment, or I could come back at the end or in the private session. If you're kind of
maybe come back in the private session.
Really.
Some of those may be teased out with questions.
Yeah,
that
very happy to do that.